Never forget my first visit to your church. Pastor Doug interviewed me standing up right in front, and he asked me a question. He said, "Your sister lives in the U.S. Don't you feel tempted to come away here?" And I remember saying to him that the mission statement that has challenged my life the most is this one: I have but one candle of life to burn, and I would rather burn it in a land filled with darkness than in a land flooded with light. As I travel in the U.S. and in Canada, I recognize that people make the choice of rejecting Jesus Christ. Every street has a church. There are churches all around. People make the choice of rejecting Jesus Christ. But where God has placed us, we are placed among a nation of people that have never heard His glorious name. And we count it a privilege to be able to make Jesus known among those that have never heard His glorious name. And what an incredible partnership is ours as you pray for us in this exciting work of taking the good news of Jesus into places where His name has never been heard. I said in the previous service that one of the things about preachers' children is that they've heard all your stories. You know, and as you go around, they've heard all of your stories, and there are some stories, the moment I start those stories, my daughters close their ears. They say, "Dad, don't tell us that story." But there are some stories that the girls really love. And as I travel, I usually like to use stories that my daughters love because it kind of gives me a sense of closeness to them. I want to begin this morning by telling you a story that my daughters deeply love. It's a story about a king who loved his people. He cared for his people in every possible way. But he was also a king who loved gardening. He would walk into his garden and talk to his flowers. He would tell the rose how pretty the rose was. He would look at the sunflower bed and just praise them for how beautiful they were. One day the king called his gardener and he said, "Hey gardener, I have a very important task to give you." And so saying, the king put in his hand a bulb. The king said, "I want you to go out to this very important part of the garden, and I want you to plant this bulb for me." And so the gardener took the bulb, he went out into the garden, he begins to dig the ground, he puts the bulb in, he fertilizes it, pours water. The king comes along, he kneels down to the ground, and he speaks to the bulb, and he says, "Hey, listen, I have chosen you for my glory." Our theme for this year's conference, Chosen to Move, I have chosen you for my glory. And as the weeks soon turn to months, all of a sudden the shoot of the bamboo comes out of the ground, and the king walks into his garden every day and he speaks to his little bamboo and he says, "Don't forget, I have chosen you for my glory." And as the months turn into years, this bamboo now begins to tower over all of the smaller plants in the garden. And as the king would come out, he would dance for the king in the wind. And as the wind went through the center shaft of the bamboo, he would even sing for the king. But every single time the king came to his garden, he would look at his bamboo and say, "Don't forget, you have been chosen for my glory." The bamboo continued to grow until finally he was majestic, 100 feet tall, towering over the rest of the plants in the garden. When the king would come into the garden, he would dance for the king, and the king would always say to him, "Remember, I planted you for my glory." One day the king came to his garden and said, "Hey bamboo, are you ready?" And the bamboo danced in the wind and said, "I've been waiting, O king, for your bidding. Use me as you choose." And the king paused for a moment and he said, "Hey, listen, bamboo, I've got some really bad news to give you. For me to be able to use you, number one, I've got to chop you down." And the bamboo looked at the king and said, "Hey, king, is there no other way?" And the king looked at his bamboo and he smiled and he said, "Don't forget, I have chosen you for my glory." And so the bamboo said, "Oh king, do with me as you please." The king said, "The second thing I have to do is that I have to remove all of your branches and your leaves." And the bamboo said, "They were like my children. I fed them and I tended them. But oh king, you planted me for your glory. Do with me as you please." The third thing the king said he had to do is that he had to split the bamboo into two. "I have to cut through your heart. It's going to hurt you." And the bamboo said, "I've heard enough. But oh king, you planted me for your glory. Do with me as you choose." And so the king cut down his bamboo, removed all of the leaves and the branches. He cut right through the bamboo. He split the bamboo into two. He attached the two edges of the bamboo. And then he took one edge of the bamboo 200 meters meters up into the mountains, into a water stream, and he fixed the bamboo down there, and he brought the other end 200 meters away to a poor village where there was no water, and the water began to trickle down the bamboo and come into the village. Ladies came with their buckets and picked up water, and they said, "Hail, King, we don't need to climb up 200 meters up the mountain." Children began to dance in the water. They began to celebrate, and as the king stood at a distance, he looked at his bamboo, and he began to tell his bamboo, "I came to the garden. You danced for me. You sang for me. You look beautiful. I cut you down. I removed your branches, your leaves. I broke you into two. But today, you look far more beautiful because you take my life-giving water and you bring them to people that hurt without me." And this morning, the Master is looking for bamboos like that. The Master is looking for people whom he can cut down, for people whom he can break, for people whose twigs and leaves he can remove, and yet for people through whose life he can flow his life-giving water to a world that is hurting without Jesus Christ. We have been chosen to move.